And I believe we are live now. So hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today to talk about Royal Assassin. This is book 2 in the Farseer Trilogy and book 2 in the Realm of the Elderlings. And I have some wonderful guests here to talk about it. We have another newbie here, Alex from Tall Guy Reads. He and I are new to this series, and we both just recently finished this book. I actually saw that Alex was reading this on Goodreads at the same time I was reading it, and I thought, hey, let's team up and talk about it. And then, of course, I had to have Jimmy and Verity, who are veterans to the whole realm of the Elderlings. And before I say more, I'll go ahead and let them all introduce themselves. So I guess we can go clockwise from where I am. So maybe Derry, if you can go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Derry. I have a very small channel and I talk about Discworld and Realm of the Elderlings because I don't know that even veteran covers what I am. A fossil, maybe? I don't know. I have read it a lot. so, yeah, so I'll have thoughts.
All right. And then Jimmy.
Well, Derry is a Hobb historian. I think that is a very popular opinion among the community. Derry, I met you through Robin Hobb. That's how we met.
Oh, no way. I didn't know that.
Yeah, met through the comments and grew from there. Now she's friends with my mom, and my mom looks forward to saying hello to Derry every live stream I do. And Robin Hobb is obviously changed my life for the better in more ways than one. And I'm so excited to talk about Royal Assassin, which I think is one of the best sequels ever. And it's one of my favorite books of all time. Definitely one of my favorite endings of all time. And the illustrated edition is beautiful if you haven't checked it out, folks. So happy to be here, Joanna.
Yay. Thank you so much for joining me, Jimmy. It's been such a while since we've done a Malazan chat together. So I was so excited to have Jimmy back. And then Derry, by the way, has fantastic content, not only on the Realm of the Elderlings. She has fantastic videos on the Realm of the Elderlings, but also on Discworld. So if you're a fan of Terry Pratchett's Discworld or the Realm of the Elderlings, you need to check out Derry's channel. And next we have Tall Guy Reads, who I am fairly new to. And actually, you've only had your channel for a month. Is that right?
Wow. Yeah, about a little over a month now, but it's been pretty crazy so far. But yeah, this is happy to be here. This is my first, again, as you said, first foray into Robin Hobb. And this is probably the fantasy series that's been sitting on my shelf for the longest time that I haven't picked up. I had like that Assassin's Apprentice, like the mass market paperback that with the really great cover. And I had that for like probably 10 years since high school. And then I just never picked it up. And then finally was like, all right, I'm going to do it. And then I started it with the channel. And so far it's been awesome.
Well, I have to say, I am so impressed with Alex's channel. For only being around for a month, he already has some excellent content. So if you're not subscribed to Alex, you definitely need to subscribe to Alex. He has fantastic, fantastic content. I've been excited to talk with him about this series, and I'm excited to have all of you in the chat who have read this book. And I know that I am very behind, I feel like, when it comes to this series, but I'm so glad I finally got to it. And if you don't know, of course, my name is Joanna with a silent H, and I am an Elvish assassin. So this series was definitely written for me. And we have so many wonderful friends here in the chat. So yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So wonderful to see you all here. And as I was kind of explaining before starting, I am fairly new to doing live streams. So I'm sorry if I get a little behind in the chat area. And the way that I usually approach these kinds of discussions is in a very non-linear way, because that's just the way my mind works. So I hope you'll bear with me as we talk about certain characters, certain things that came up for us, what we appreciated, and enjoy as Derry and Jimmy try to avoid spoiling us for the rest of the series. So in a non-spoiler way to start, and I think pretty much everybody in the chat has read the book, but we'll start non-spoiler just in case. So in a non-spoiler way, I guess I'll start with Alex. Alex, what did you think of Royal Assassin, especially after Assassin's Apprentice?
Yeah, so I mean, I love this book. I think for Assassin's Apprentice, I went in kind of expecting not to like it as much. I kind of was just going to be like, all right, I'm going to brace it. Just based on what I was hearing from a lot of people who have read this series, they said Assassin's Apprentice is one of the ones that they just didn't like as much compared to some of the others in the series. And I ended up loving it. So I went into Royal Assassin and I was like, okay, well, the hype for this book is really big. And I think it paid off. I think a lot of the building that happened in Assassin's Apprentice when it came to Fitz and like Fitz's unhappiness had a lot of payoff in this book. So it was kind of really satisfying to see some of those things start to be developed and just like the magic system start to be developed. And there's introduction and more development of characters that we saw from Assassin's Apprentice. That was just really interesting. And I also think one of my favorite parts about this series, or about this book specifically, was that the one con I had about Assassin's Apprentice was that the villains were kind of a little over the top. Like I enjoyed them, but they were kind of over the top. But I feel like in this book, Regal, for example, was more, I just thought he was better. He was better written and he was more of a complex villain. And so I think that added a lot to this story as we were kind of watching Fitz grow up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love this book. It was really good.
Yes, absolutely. And how about you, Jimmy? When you think about your journey through the realm of the Elderlings, how do you think of Royal Assassin?
Royal Assassin. So most times in a book two, when we have an epic fantasy series that we're reading through, we expect book two to be the world builder. I always call it. You know, book one, you're going to get some exposition and stuff, but usually the world starts to open up in a lot of book twos. In some ways, the book did open up, but in some ways, I felt like it remained super close to the chest. And that is the bread and butter of what Robin Hobb does. Robin Hobb is able to somehow expand the world by helping us learn more about Fitz. And I think it's one of the more tremendous things about the series is the fact that in a first-person book, she manages to captivate us with really amazing world building, lore, also side characters. I mean, some of the side characters that we really see come into play in Royal Assassin end up being some of my favorite of all time. And that's all from a first-person perspective and a framed narrative, which is really fascinating because Fitz is recalling this, right? So we have to go with the information that he knows. And one of the things that's so impressive about this is the fact that Fitz doesn't know a lot because he's young and relatively stupid. And it's just one of those things where it feels natural in book two that we get to learn a little bit more because Fitz is just a little bit older. He's 6 years old in Farseer and growing up. But I feel like he's old enough now to where I can start to relate to him a little bit. And have memories of myself at that young, dumb age and infatuation and all of these things and thinking you know what you want. So it's interesting because the world does expand in book two, but it is not the bridge book. It is not the world building book. It's a solidified entry into the trilogy and through all 16. I mean, you can take a look back at this book, and I think that this is the catalyst for a lot of the events that come through in the future. This book is monumental for what Robin Hobb does later.
That is so cool. And I love what you said too about the first person perspective, because I have to say, even just getting into Assassin's Apprentice, and I, like Alex, I'd heard mixed feelings about Assassin's Apprentice. I have some friends who have tried it over and over again and not been able to get through it. They just couldn't connect with it. And I didn't have that problem at all. I connected with Fitz instantly, and I felt as though her first person narration was so seamless for me. I felt like I just sunk into it like a well-fit glove. Like I felt like I understood. I don't know, like usually with first person narration, I feel like there's a little bit of an adjustment I have to go through to get used to it. And I didn't feel that way at all. And I totally agree that her character work was phenomenal for being in first person. So I don't know how she does it. It's just amazing.
She has the best command of perspective of any writer I've ever seen. When I chat with Steven Erikson, he said when he did workshops, he actually uses her as the perfect example of holding perspective. And you'll see it even in traditionally published books. I mean, there's times where people will lose their perspective in the book. And, you know, as readers, like we're generally just trying to read to enjoy. So we don't really notice those things if we're not looking into like the technical details. And I'm not even that smart. But there's none of those hiccups. And that's why it can go smooth as butter through these first few books, even when not a lot's happening. It just feels natural. And that is a testament to her ability to write in the first person.
Yes. And Derry, would you like to expand on that?
I will. One of the things that I've encountered the most over the years is people going, but nothing happens. Stop it. Lots of things happen. Okay. They're just not big, exciting things. If nothing happened, there'd be no story. Plenty of things happen, but they're just necessary to move the story along. And for Assassin's Apprentice, it's quite a passive book from Fitz's point of view. He's a child. He's at the mercy of other people. When we come into Assassin's Quest, he's 15. He's a man. He's more in control of what he chooses to do and not do. So that agency alone gives it more, it makes it more dynamic to read, because he's actually making decisions and acting on them when perhaps he shouldn't, but it's Fitz. And, that's kind of the point of why we're reading. So,
Absolutely.
Things happen.
And you bring up a really good point, Derry, about being an engaged, protagonist. But in Royal Assassin, we see Fitz does take actions into his own hands, but it's only after painstakingly having his agency removed from him because of a title that he has that he never wanted. And I think that makes, when he takes those actions, as small or not grand as they may seem compared to other epic fantasy, it means so much more whenever you have the ability taken away from you to make a choice and then you make it anyways. I mean, it means so much more to us, and also for Fitz. And I think that is a really neat way of getting a lot out of a little.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm not going to say what I'm thinking because spoilers.
Yeah. Well,
I have a really good point to make there, but I can't make it just yet.
I just love what everyone is saying in the chat too. It seems like there is just a chorus of agreement about how wonderful Hobb does character work, and her storytelling ability is just incredible. Sing the praises.
Absolutely.
I've just been so impressed so far. So impressed with the whole journey. I think from here, I guess we can go ahead and go into spoilers from here. I think that's a pretty good introduction for those who are not familiar with Robin Hobb. And I guess what I say, just to kind of, as we start off in this book, and again, I'm not going to go in a linear way. We might jump all over the place. We're just going to see where the conversation goes about the book. But one thing I find so funny and interesting about Fitz's journey in this book is how he is somebody who has all of these secret identities. I mean, he has a secret identity with Molly and with Jade and with Verity and with Nighteyes, who we meet in this book, with so many different characters, with Burek, with I think with Patience, like all these different identities, all these different secret identities, I should say, and yet there's no privacy. That's the funny thing, is that the way the magic works, it's like there's no privacy, because Verity gets in his mind, and it's kind of questionable, like how often Verity is in his mind. I know that he tells Fitz that he will let his presence be known. I question that, honestly. And same with Nighteyes too. Nighteyes is obviously in his mind all the time. And I mean, it just seems like things about Fitz and what he does are just a little more well known, I think, than he thinks they are.
Mm-hmm.
So, thoughts on that?
I think he keeps secrets from everybody. Everybody he's holding something back from. He keeps secrets from the king. He keeps secrets from Shade. The only person he doesn't keep any secrets from, and I call him a person because he's a person, is Nighteyes. And so of everybody in Fitz's life, only Nighteyes knows all of who he is. And in keeping so many secrets, the isolation that Fitz lives within kind of defines who he is, that nobody really knows every part of him. And I love that, because it means when he interacts with other characters, you have to remember which secrets he's keeping from that character to make that interaction work. And I love that. I just love it so much.
Yeah. Good. Any
Yeah.
other thoughts on that?
I think this is a thing that will be important later, about who Fitz is to who. And it's set up all the way back here in this. And him keeping secrets and him having like these very isolated thoughts, right? Besides Nighteyes, I think it's kind of natural in a way to keep secrets and to have things for yourself whenever you feel like you don't have any privacy, whenever you feel like you don't have any agency in your life. And Fitz doesn't get to make a ton of decisions. So I think it's pretty natural. Like I remember, being a kid, even around Fitz's age, like nothing you do is very private. You do something and then your mom would be like, "Hey, I heard you did this." You're like, "How did you know?"
Yeah.
Like, where are the cameras? Well, someone told me, little birdie told me. And you're like, "I'm grounded." Great. It's that kind of stuff. Like, how did you know that, I was drinking Coke behind the store when I shouldn't have, whatever it was. And I think that's something that is very, very relatable. And it's really perfect for that age that Fitz is at. And something that I can see, back in my past and feeling like there wasn't a lot of privacy, which leads to the rebellious teenage years, of course, which Fitz rebels in a different way at the end of the book.
Yes.
Never went that far myself, but nevertheless, I do think it's a pretty realistic thing to occur. And again, it's all through his lens, right?
Yeah. And that's such a good point that Evie brings up here too, that he doesn't really know himself at the same time. So in addition to him struggling to have any sort of agency at all,
Right.
just trying to know himself. And how do you know yourself when you're trying to be so many different people
Mhm.
to so many different people at the same time? And I think like one of the themes that I kind of see with that is loyalty, because I feel like Fitz, and this is kind of, again, jumping ahead, I feel like a sense I got from this book, even from Assassin's Apprentice and this book, is just the theme of loyalty and how loyal he feels to certain people. And at the same time, trying to be loyal to so many different people in different ways, it catches up with him in this book.
Yeah.
Alex, do you want to share? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, I definitely agree with everything you said. I think one of my favorite parts about this story was the development of those relationships they had with different people, whether it was Molly and what he was hiding from Molly, and then what he finally revealed to Molly later, and then, or what he continues to hide from Chade, even though Chade probably is guessing that he's using the wit and so on. And then as that develops throughout the story, that was some of my favorite development in the book, because I feel like a lot of it was established in book one in terms of just Chade's relationship, or Chade's view on using, or not Chade, Burrich's view on using the wit, Fitz's use of the wit, and how Galen's abuse in book one paid off in book two, to the point where he's still using it anyway. And he meets Nighteyes, and that develops more than you've ever seen up to this point. So I think that, and then just continuing to, while he's trying to serve all these different people, whether it be Molly or Burrich or even Chade, who's like not in, I don't know, I didn't really feel like he was as big of a presence in this book as he was in book one. I just thought it was fascinating. And I think it plays into the whole characterization strength of Robin Hobb. And it was just really interesting to watch. But I mean, I think the Molly, leading into what I was bringing up about Molly, I think the interaction with Molly throughout this book was really interesting, because, and this kind of goes into a different thing, but I will say that the relationship they had, while I think at first I was kind of like, didn't know what to think of Molly. I was like, oh, is she irritating, or am I just reading the book? But then it started to develop, and then it basically was, I mean, he's like 13 or 14 and they're having like a full-on relationship. Hobb kind of shows us a relationship as it's going on, instead of a lot of teenage, I don't know, if there's like a teenage relationship in a book, a lot of times it's built up and it's just teased for like ever and ever. But in here, they're like actually in a relationship, dealing with real problems and like how to address it and how to like move on with their life.
Yeah.
And a lot of real issues come up in this book between them. And I don't know, again, that was just really fascinating to me, and just watching that develop along with all of the other characterization that was going on.
Yeah,
I'm just going to say, sorry, Joanna. I was just going to say that we know at the beginning of of Royal Assassin, we know that he's 15. At the very end of Assassin's Apprentice, and he's recovering from the events of how all that ended, that it states categorically he was 15. So from Royal Assassin to the end of Royal Assassin, I don't know, 1, maybe 2 years. So we're in that 15, 16, 17-year-old age gap. So that makes it a little easier, I think, to do the whole relationship with Molly reading. What I will say with the character development with Fitz and his loyalties, which is a great point, Alex, which it reminds me of the books also being published at a similar time with A Song of Ice and Fire and Jaime and his conflicting loyalties. And we see it with Fitz. Does he put his loyalty to Molly ahead of his loyalty to his king, ahead of his loyalty to Shade, to Boric, to all of these different tugs on his emotions? And I think that she's done a really, really good job of showing that conflict for Fitz.
Do you all feel that with Nighteyes being introduced when he was, do you feel like a lot of Fitz's acting out and making rash decisions comes from the fact that between the bond between Nighteyes and Fitz, that they become more like one another? Like, obviously
I do.
Nighteyes is getting more human as they interact. This is how the old blood works, really. And then Fitz is also getting a little bit more animalistic. Do you feel like that is kind of a nudge for him to act more, primal in some ways?
Is that what's happening? I don't.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good.
I didn't make
never
that
thought of that.
connection.
Well, a lot of people.
No, I do.
Well,
he's caged. He's angry. He's resisting being kept, and that anger, I think, Fitz is tapping into.
Yeah,
he's like more willing to act on a lot of his
urges.
Feelings. Yeah, exactly. In this book than he ever was in book 1, and that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's interesting that Nighteyes is in a cage, right? Whenever he meets him, and Fitz in a lot of ways is being boxed in too. So they're almost direct parallels of one another. And I've seen people level things like Nighteyes is, a great animal companion, but he's too human-like. But if you remember when he's introduced, I mean, he is not very human-like. That is an effect and a consequence from the wit. So that's why I love Nighteyes, and is my favorite animal companion of all time, and just one of my favorite friendships of all time too. But yeah, I see a lot of the placement of Nighteyes being introduced, and then you see the decisions that he makes after that. I think that's a direct side effect.
So that's such a good point, because I was thinking at the end of the book, I don't know why I just failed to kind of make that connection, because he goes ballistic at the end of the book when he stabs Justin, and even when he's scheming to poison Wallace. He doesn't want to just kill Wallace. He wants Wallace to die a brutal, ugly death. Yeah. And I'm
man.
and I think that's an interesting point, that they are kind of feeding off each other's energy because of the magic. And did I get this right? Did he get healing powers through the wit? Is that why he recovered so much?
I don't know I'm going to let Derry answer this one. I remember a lot of the book, but I don't remember every little detail.
Because he was suffering quite a bit at the beginning with the seizures, with just feeling very, he was really struggling. And then it seemed like at a certain point, I felt like he wasn't struggling anymore. And I wondered about that. And I thought, I wonder if it's because of the bond with Nighteyes, if he got some sort of energy from that. Like some sort of life force or something.
The magics that Fitz has makes a lot of things possible, and the magics he has aren't always consciously controlled, and he has people around him who have similar magics who also aren't always conscious of their use of their magic. And some of this will be explained later and some of it will be overt, and most of it will become clear later. But you have picked up on a
That is a very important
very
detail.
baby thread.
Yeah.
Well done.
Okay, cool. I mean, there's a lot of interesting things about the magic there. Did you want to add anything, Alex? I'm sorry. I feel like I haven't given you enough chance to talk.
Oh no, I think in line with that, there was the sequence like in the middle of the book where Verity was unknowingly skilling to Fitz. At least that's what I assumed was happening. Like when he was seeing Kettricken and he was like with Molly.
Yeah.
I assumed that he was getting like Verity was unknowingly skilling to Fitz, and I was like, why is Verity? Does he just not have control over that? Because to me, before that, either it's wearing him down so much to the point that he's just kind of losing his grasp over his magic as the story goes on, or he really isn't as strong as maybe you think he is. I don't know.
Are you
Part
talking?
of
Which
it there.
exact scene? Are you talking about the scene where he's seeing, like he's with Kettricken, or he's seeing Kettricken? Okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about. That scene was wild.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
I wonder.
One of the things
man.
the skill does is connect like to like. So when you consider that scene, both he and Verity are in a very similar headspace. And so that connection forms more easily whether or not they each have walls up, whether or not they're each projecting. The connection exists on an emotional plane rather than a conscious one.
Okay,
and the
sense.
skill enables that if they're not deliberately blocking each other. So, yeah.
And there's some interesting things hinted at with the magic, with the wit and the skill in this book, like the scene where he repels Justin through Nighteyes.
Oh, that,
And it
yeah, that was
says
cool.
there that it's more than repelling, that it's like a hybrid magic, that Nighteyes used the wit through a bridge the skill had created. So
Yeah.
I found that really interesting because I think that's the sort of combination of the wit and the skill, of course, that is channeling through Fitz, and that maybe I don't know, we haven't seen any explanation of that yet in this world, even though in some of the epigraphs, there's some epigraphs that talk about sort of the background lore behind the piebald print and how the wit came about in the first place. And there's some background lore about the skill and how that came about, but there's not any information thus far about that hybrid magic, which it seems like Fitz is experiencing through Nighteyes and the skill.
Yeah, and a lot of the magic stuff is ambiguous.
Yeah.
And it plays a major role. Like later, it's so hard. You know, I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah.
It's like, just wait. But yeah, just wait.
These
are all important things. Though. These are all very important things to take note of.
Absolutely.
And also, this is my favorite magic system ever, by the way. Easily my favorite. It's so interesting. I love that it's not just the wit and it's not just the skill, but both of them. They're not inherently against one another, because usually in fantasy it's like dark and light, or whatever, fire and ice, or whatever it might be. Like they just coexist as forces of nature almost, right? Like they're just in the world as is, without a handbook to really explain everything. So
yeah, I love the way it's introduced, honestly.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, and you're like learning about it as Fitz is learning about it, just through like events in the story, and it's not, I don't know, it's not really told to you. I mean, there's like the epigraph or the italicized epigraphs in the beginning of each chapter, but I think most of what you're learning is through Fitz's interactions as the story unfolds.
Oh yeah, and even the kitchen gossip. I've always talked about this in all the reviews I ever did. The kitchen gossip's the greatest example of world building. And it's unreliable narrator times 2 because you get it from the cook, who then goes into a 16-year-old who doesn't know his head from the hole in the ground. So now you have to filter the information through 2 things. I mean, this is very fun. And this is how that we find out. We don't know anything about most of the world outside of Buck, at this point. But what we hear is what we can take. And we know that people have biases, right? And people have superstitions. And there's all these things. And that'll play a role later on. Cultural superstitions will definitely play a role later on. And a lot of that groundwork, again, kind of laid right here. And I love it. I just love Fitz's perspective so much.
Yeah. Well, I see a lot of people excited about Assassin's Quest in the chat, and I know a lot of you have read it. Thank you so much for not spoiling it for us, for Alex and me. But I am curious because, I mean, there were so many things that were opened up in this book.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I wonder how that's going to wrap up. Like, there is so much mystery with the red ships and what's going on with them. And there's also so much mystery with like the white ships that Fitz is seeing. And I'm curious if that has any sort of connection to the hybrid magic or what's going on there. Anyway, yeah. Any thoughts about that?
Verity going on a quest of his own, right? Like,
yeah,
that's a pretty big question mark that's hanging out there.
It's like a really big wide open door there to who knows what.
So, I know I'm probably wrong about this. And I've already said it in Discords, and I think everybody's kind of laughing at me about this theory, but I do not trust Verity. And I haven't trusted. Okay, so I'm probably wrong because everybody is having that reaction to me when I say that. But the reason I'm having that is because actually it's because of Jimmy's wonderful video where you talked about the scene that you might have missed at the beginning of Assassin's Apprentice. Such a good video. If you all haven't watched that video, please watch Jimmy's video on that. It's so good. But it caused me to go back to the beginning of Assassin's Apprentice and review some things. And when I reviewed, and of course, this is all unreliable narrator through Fitz's perspective. When I went back and reviewed some of the opening of Assassin's Apprentice, it sounded like the conversation that Regal was having about how the information of Fitz's existence being known, it was because of Verity. Verity is the reason that the kingdom found out about Fitz existing. And it could have been to protect Fitz, because then if he had said anything about Fitz, or maybe if he hadn't said anything about Fitz, it would have been all the more reason for Regal or other people to come along and discard Fitz, to kill him off or something.
Yeah.
But I wondered about that. I'm like, why is he letting this be known when it obviously is going to put chivalry in some, murky waters, having this bastard known about? So and there were other things that also made me suspicious of Verity. He says in this book, he says he's using Fitz as a weapon. He pretty much comes out and says that at one point. And of course, he does have more of a military mind. That is part of his character. But also, the Fool doesn't trust Verity was also something, and I don't know if that was something I picked up on too. The Fool was not feeling as loyal to Verity as Fitz feels loyal to Verity. The Fool feels more, of course, loyal to Shrewd. So anyway, those are just my conspiracy theories. I'm probably wrong.
No, I like where your brain's at. And I also like the fact that you're considering what the Fool is thinking, because the Fool is just always there at certain times. The Fool, I'm trying to remember. Well, actually, we should talk about the Verity thing first, because I can neither confirm or deny your theory. But I have characters that I don't trust still after I finish the series. So I was very sus about certain characters and how they used Fitz, because Fitz is being used by a lot of people.
That's true. That's true.
And on top of that, the only person that he feels like he has a connection with, whenever he's finally honest about these burdens that he's being forced into, flat out rejects him. I mean, it's just so sad, really. And then you have the Fool just kind of hanging out over on the side the whole time. Is
Yeah.
this the book where the fool is abused?
Yes.
Yes.
By Regal. Is
So
is this the
sad.
one? I couldn't remember if it was AA or
Yeah.
this. Oh, how heartbreaking is that?
Yeah.
Well,
Oh, it was so heartbreaking. It was so awful.
Made me so mad.
But yeah, I mean, I see your point. I wonder if I could trust anybody too, because even just Fitz coming in back into Buckkeep after obviously Verity and Shrewd, everyone knows that Regal tried to kill him,
Yeah.
and nobody, they're all just, oh, brush it under the rug. Let's have this sort of reluctant truce going on.
Yeah.
Who allows that?
Well, there's always been a lot of problematic people if you look back through royalty and history. I mean, there's been a lot of problem childs that had grand visions for themselves that really caused a lot of chaos failing. But the unity of the crown is super duper important. So it is mustache twirly in a way. Like, I definitely agree with that. I personally think that sometimes we need that in our stories. I like knowing that I can hate someone and not have to think about the moral complexity of the situation.
Yeah.
Cough, cough, Malazan. Malazan, I'm like, I hate that guy. And AP's like, let me tell you why you shouldn't. And I'm like, can I just hate him? Can I just hate the guy?
Just want a baddie.
Yeah, and Regal does have motivations too. Like, I think when we get more about Regal's information and then his mother and everything, and then like Galen's relationship to him, like, I think Regal has justifiable motivations for himself. I mean, he's a sociopath, but it is what it is. Like, I could see someone existing like that in real life. So even though it is mustache twirly, there's a lot of crappy people out there. So for me, even though he is mustache twirly, I think he could have existed in a royal family, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I could see him existing in a royal family, and I could see them turning a blind eye to it, especially with Verity and how obsessive he is about the threat that is coming, and then Shrewd's declining health. I mean, it's just a perfect storm, really. And if you think about it,
You need a spare. Yeah.
and Regal has controlled the CIA,
Yeah.
That's what they are, right? Like Serene and Justin, is that his name?
Yeah.
Serene and Justin, I mean, they're the CIA. That's what they are. And he said, oh, you guys can do all this stuff, and while you guys are defending our borders, I'm going to do the inside job. I mean, it's very well crafted. I really, really enjoy Regal. I mean, I hate him, but like, oh, what a slippery devil.
Oh, he's fun to hate.
Yeah.
Oh, I hate him so
Yeah,
much.
I hate him too. But I'd like to hear, Alex, your thoughts, because you said that you felt like he was more fleshed out in this particular book. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I think one, he wasn't in this book. I didn't feel like he was in this book. He was kind of in the background more than you saw him in book one until like halfway through the book, and then he started becoming more of a part of the story. But when it comes to like Regal's successes in this book were just so hard to watch. And because I feel like you could kind of see him coming for a while, and you could see how it was going to go. And there's like no other, I don't know. It was hard to see it not go the way that Regal wanted it to go in a lot of situations leading up to the end of the book. And it was just hard to watch. And I feel like, as Jimmy was saying, you kind of started to see more of Regal's motivations, and it wasn't just, oh, this stereotypical bad guy that you have like in the story that maybe he was in book one, but I don't know. I thought he was just a much better character to read, and he felt like a more intimidating villain than he did in book one. Like book one, I honestly thought Galen was much more. I just hated Galen more than I did Regal.
Yeah.
Just because of all the scenes with him and Fitz, it was just brutal, and then the whole ending.
He was more overtly,
yeah, exactly. It was easier to hate him, and then in this book, obviously, there's just much more going on that you don't know about, and as Fitz is learning about it, you start to wonder, okay, what's Regal really up to? And then as you started seeing it unfurl as the story goes on, and as the ending comes, it's just like, I don't know, pretty crushing, because you're just like, man, he's getting away with almost everything that he wants to get away with right now.
Yeah.
I know, and it's just amazing at that end, because you see through Fitz's perspective that Fitz understands how dangerous Regal is, and how the other dukes don't get it. They don't get.
They haven't seen.
Dangerous. Yeah. They just see him as kind of a spoiled, rich, snobby person who wants the kingdom, but they don't really see how how far he's willing to go, and
No,
it's just
that's right.
devastating. So what about Kettricken? Let's talk about Kettricken here, because when she starts out, I was a little surprised that she was kind of hanging out with Regal, and even given the events at the end of Assassin's Apprentice. But she really, what an interesting character. So thoughts on her, Alex? Why don't you start for us?
Yeah, well, I mean, in line with that, I think one of my biggest surprises about this book, because I didn't really know what the premise was going to be. I totally, just based on the prologue, you kind of get the sense that, all right, this is going to take place not at Buckkeep, and it's going to go somewhere else. But then you end up at Buckkeep, and the entire story is like where it takes place. But Kettricken's character, I loved watching her develop, and I think as she started to kind of take more agency of her place in this royal family and what she wanted to do and what she kind of wanted to get out of her life in Buck, it was just fun to watch. And watching her go on those, like, leading those missions and those hunts or whatnot by herself with her own guard that she was kind of leading out of there without any permission by anyone else, was, I don't know, I just thought it was fun. And then Verity had like no clue what was going on for a lot of the time, and it was just fun to watch Fitz find out and see her and be like, why are you out here? And then learn all of what her viewpoint is on her place in the royal family as it was going on.
Yeah, absolutely. What did you think about how she decided to go out and fight even though she was pregnant? That was interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that was
the heir to the kingdom. That was quite the choice, huh?
Yeah, I was just like, how are you doing that? But I was more like, how are you like comfortable to do that? But it was, I don't know. I think it wasn't in line with her character and how her character was developing up to that point. She was kind of like just ready to take control over the situation before anyone else and not let anyone else take her agency away from her, or as what she felt of it in her situation. And I just thought that was, I don't know. It was, I didn't agree. I mean, why would you do that? But it was fun to watch her do that because I thought it aligned with her character.
That's a really good point that you bring up, though, is the fact that Robin Hobb, she gives female characters a lot of agency, I think, and especially Kettricken, because that is something I think a lot of people wouldn't want to do, is give a pregnant character agency because they're pregnant. And in this case, just even though it's the risky decision and one maybe we question a little bit, I think it's kind of neat that she does it anyway for that reason alone. But
well, she's the sacrifice.
Yeah, the sacrifice idea. And I thought it was also interesting too. It's pointed out more than once, I think, by Fitz, that Kettricken is honest, and that honest quality of it in her doesn't necessarily make her an effective leader. But it does but she does seem to win over the other duchies, or the other kingdoms.
Yeah.
Through her honesty, through her offering the emeralds at that one point. So she seems to be
Kettricken definitely engenders loyalty with that honesty. Absolutely. As riding to battle when pregnant, she's not a lot pregnant. She's not, in any way disabled by that pregnancy, and she's capable of fighting. And I think for a lot of women who have been pregnant, there's an almost annoying sense of, I'm not broken, I can still do stuff. And at that point, there wasn't the same sense of Verity may not come back. It was all still perfectly possible that it was all going to go smoothly. So there was no real reason for her to feel that she had to protect this particular pregnancy. So, and she wasn't certain at that point until they'd been gone a few days. That it's in her character to go, well, I'm capable of this job, so let's go and do it. And I love that about her.
Yeah. So my heart actually broke for her when she didn't get to go on that journey to go look for the elder rings, like how she wanted to go on that journey, and instead Verity decided to keep her he's like, no, you'll be the sacrifice here at Buckkeep. So it just felt bad for her that she didn't get that choice.
Yeah, and the thing I really like about Kettricken, and I pronounce it differently, so don't make
No,
fun
you
of
said you probably pronounce it right.
Yeah,
Probably
keep
do it.
pronouncing it your way though, because I like
No.
pronunciations.
I always mispronounce everything.
Me
Go
too.
ahead.
You should watch my Berserk streams. The thing about Kettricken that's dope to me is that she is the badass female warrior, but she still remains a woman. So often we see the badass female warrior who isn't interested in love and just wants to do things her way and isn't misunderstood, whereas Kettricken's actually very well understood. Now, does that mean that she is the prototypical woman that is at Buck? No, not at all. The Mountain Kingdom and her culture actually matter in her character. And it's not just that she is a pregnant warrior fighting woman. Like that's not not just it. There's a whole lot more to her character, and she blends and interacts with the environment of Buck. And that makes her feel like a real person. And again, this is happening not through her perspective. It's happening through Fitz's perspective. The Queen's Guard, all these things are monumental moments that you could write a book about. I mean, you could write this book from Kettricken's perspective. You really could. And Robin Hobb is able to do that through Fitz, who also feels like a bit of an outsider, who also is being put in a position with a title that he might not be all that suited for. And Kettricken, it turns out she is suited for it, but it's by no means of her being fake or she's not pretending. She's so authentic, and she just happens to be exactly what Buck needed at the time.
Yeah, that's
I
so
like
well
when
said.
Shade called her a queen in the blood. Oh no, wrong character.
There's a lot of them.
What did he say about her? It's the queen we needed when she takes them out on the Queen's hunt. That was so poignant. You've got a castle yard full of people out to go and kill those people who are hunting our folk.
Yep.
And she manages to bring them back and go, we're not murderers. We're going to collect our lost. And suddenly this fierce, warlike feeling is turned into something really quiet and introspective. And actually, we are having to kill our own people. And the tragedy of it is really brought back to the forefront. And that's a gift that Kettricken has, that she can remind people of the heart of something rather than how it, reads better. She's like, no, what we're actually doing is something really sad. And that entire scene still is one of the most beautiful, I think, in the entire series.
Yeah, I think that it's the cost of duty, and what means of what we're really doing instead of heroics running around. And isn't that just the tale of Realm of the Elderlings in general? Is that heroics are not always they're not always great, and they take a toll on the person committing them. And we see that through those people. We see it through Fitz clearly, and then we'll see it in other aspects of the series as well. And if you really need another example of a wonderful female character, and Philip said this in chat, he said, I also feel like Patience is incredibly heroic. Are you kidding me? I mean, Patience taking in her bastard son.
Oh, I know.
I love Patience. And one of my favorite things is Fitz reflecting on the fact that here's this woman who should hate him. And she hates everything about politics. She hates the castle. She hates the thought that somebody in that castle killed her husband.
Yeah.
And she came anyway to protect the bastard son of her husband. That's the only reason she came, was to look after him. And he's like, even though it put me in more danger than ever before, because she had made everybody focus on me, the fact that she did that for me, and I wept buckets reading that, because I'm like, yes, she totally did. She totally was going because she wanted to be.
I can relate to every single one of these characters so much. That's the crazy thing. And like Patience, in book 1, there was that line where Fitz approaches Patience and says to her, I'm a bastard. I'm not like, I don't matter. I'm a bastard. He basically tries to remind her, and she looks at him with just this emotion and says, how do you think I could forget that? Like, it hit me so hard. Oh.
Yeah.
There's so many moments like that where Fitz is getting like very, he's getting irate or obtuse, and someone just
shut down.
hits him with the, like, listen, you little shit. Like,
Yeah.
oh man,
Take a second and think here.
the best dialogue in fantasy.
I love what you were saying earlier too, Jimmy, about just the constant reminder that we're seeing this all through Fitz's perspective, because it's so, that's the beauty of Robin Hobb's writing, is it's so good. You almost forget that. And the thing that was, I just love, one of the things that I just loved in this book was learning about the backstory between Patience and Burek, if I'm saying his name right. So I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing again.
I've heard Burek and Burich.
Yeah.
I don't know. And I don't listen to the audiobooks of these, but I loved that. I love the scene too where she's going to help Burek and he's like kind of trying to resist any help because who he is. He's stubborn. And she calls him Burr. He's like, Burr. I just love him. Come on, Burr.
And how that reminds Fitz that, that's right. Burek has a relationship with Patience that I'm not part of. And that took him aback for a second.
I'm not the center of the world.
I loved that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But think about it. It's like when you find out your
and
teachers.
How cool is Lacey?
Oh yeah, I mean, the best duo. So good.
Did you find that out from the Fool? I'm pretty sure. Does the Fool is the Fool the one that tells him that, or
I don't remember.
I think you might be right.
Molly.
Oh, it is Molly.
Yeah,
it is Molly.
Oh,
because they're talking about how Fitz was the best thing to come out of the stable since Burek, and they start talking about. You mean the servants talk about stuff like that?
Yeah.
Molly's like, yeah.
It's like whenever you find out that your teachers have a significant other or go out for beer after, and you're like, you don't sleep in the classroom, you just stayed here.
What do you mean?
Yeah, and it's kind of that veil getting pulled back. That's part of growing up. And one of the things that Robin Hobb is really great at, of a ton of things that she's great at, but she makes me feel like embarrassed for Fitz. Like secondhand embarrassment is a real thing when you read these books, and you're just like, it's like cringy to read because you're just like, God.
Oh, Fitz, don't say that. Don't say that.
Yeah, you're just not, dude. What did you guys think about Nighteyes? Being there with Fitz and Molly.
Oh, it was so disturbing.
Very disturbing, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I remember reading it twice and just being like, did that really just happen?
Oh, okay. So I have a question. When you guys can't spoil it for me, unfortunately, but Alex, you could tell me what you think of. So there's a scene where, let's see if I could put this. I think I wrote this down. He says, "I can't explain what happened next. I let go of something. I clutched at all my life without being aware of that I was gripping it. I sank deep into darkness." And while Nighteyes kept watch for me, something along those lines. He completely lets go. And then when he wakes up, Molly is there and he doesn't know what happened. And I said, well, she was grieving, so I had to take care of her basically. And Molly basically says, something along the lines of, let us leave tonight as it is. Perfect. And he doesn't remember any of this.
How sad.
And Nighteyes does. And at the end, we pretty much get the impression, even if Fitz doesn't, that Molly is pregnant.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about if that was the moment their child was conceived and what that might mean magic-wise. And I don't know. All these questions come up.
It's the little things. It's those little details, though, that really drive this series forward. It's so good. But what a disturbing thing.
Yeah,
and also another tragedy for Fitz. He can't remember possibly the
perfect moment.
Oh my goodness. I'm blushing for him. It's
I look awful. At it. I reading it in isolation as I did for so long, you realize how much your own head can limit what you see and don't see until you get those other perspectives. So I'd read it a lot before I heard people going, oh my God, that was really weird. And I was like, yeah. But it didn't strike me like that at the because all I could think was Nighteyes understood how important Molly is. because Fitz was at this point in the story, they're the leader of their tiny pack, and only the leader has a mate, and the mate, the head wolf in his pack, was grieving. His job is to make that individual feel better, and as a wolf, he saw nothing wrong with that. And for Fitz to be like, dude,
Yeah.
that puzzles Nighteyes as much as it puzzles the rest of us. The
Oh, yeah,
whole
he's like,
situation.
Can you at least
different for
not
Nighteyes.
let me be aware that you're aware?
Yeah.
With Molly?
Yeah. Yeah.
'Cause
Just
it's
don't
like
let me
when
know
you're in
that
the
you know.
dorms and you have a roommate. That you haven't
So
Yeah.
It's like he's
Alex,
always
gosh,
at.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
How was that freaking weird for you, Alex?
Yeah, it was weird. It seems like Nighteyes is literally always there in Fitz's thoughts, whether he wants to or
Yep.
not. And then when he consciously gives him permission, then obviously he's going to be there. And then Fitz fully forgets what happens during those moments. But every time else, then Nighteyes has full control, whether Fitz knows or not. And then I don't know. That was just super fascinating. I want to learn more about that. And then when it comes to Molly being pregnant, I totally assumed she was pregnant. But I remember after I finished this book, I looked it up and people didn't know whether she was pregnant or not. And
I
I
feel
was
like
like,
it was so obvious, though.
I thought because
No, I feel it.
they were
I feel it.
talking and she was getting ready to leave and she was like, I have to do it for him. And I have a new man. And like, she was talking as if she was talking about her kid. And then
Yeah.
I don't think she has
That
another
was the
man, but
subtext that totally went over Fitz's head.
yeah.
Yeah.
'Cause I was reading that. I was like, okay, she's pregnant with his kid and she's
Yeah.
leaving. But
Yeah, Fitz is just
I
not.
think
said-
Robin Hobb set it up beautifully for you to be thinking
Yeah.
about it, because Patience has the conversation with Fitz about the herbs. That
oh yeah.
you know, Molly was looking for herbs supposedly for
Tansy.
this, but it could also be used for, you know, preventing pregnancy and how it's bitter. And so you hear a couple of different things there, that Patience is saddened by the fact that Molly is trying to prevent a pregnancy while she had tried so hard for so long to become pregnant. So you get that sadness as well in the conversation, as Fitz is undergoing a mind-blowing moment of, oh my God, I might get my girlfriend pregnant because I'm sleeping with her, because he's an idiot. And
Yeah,
so she sets it up. She's like, okay, now pay attention. Is Molly pregnant? And there's enough clues there, definitely.
So many good hooks going into the third book.
And there was a conversation between Molly and Fitz earlier on too, where Molly says, "What if I was pregnant? What then?" And he said, "Well, I put you off in a safe place, and then I go and visit you." And that's not what she wants.
Yeah, she's like, I don't want that.
Yeah, talk about
so
testing the
awful.
waters. She's like, how is this going to go if I tell you that I'm pregnant?
And so
Yeah,
to me,
because
it
he's
made
a-
perfect sense too, that when he does reveal to her at the end that he's an assassin, that she's horrified by that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
with
it's-
that part,
Yeah.
by the way, that was one of the parts. There were a couple of parts in this book that just broke me. And that was one of the parts that broke me, where he says that he basically always predicted that him keeping the truth from Molly was going to drive them apart, but that the truth had severed in an
truth is
instant. He says the truth had severed in an instant what my lies had held together for a year or something like that. So see, what am I supposed to learn from that? Just understanding.
You know, another thing about this is like Molly's reaction to Fitz being an assassin, also Kettricken's speech about what they're really out there to do, and then what we see happen when Fitz lashes out and kills people. This series does not glorify violence at all. It actually does the exact opposite in a time where glorifying violence in fantasy was pretty commonplace. I mean, kind of like part of the thing, like part of the genre, right? Almost never does violence in these books result in a good thing, even if it's the hero taking said action. How many times we've read books with assassins that, oh, you're an assassin, that's sexy. You know, that's not at all. Molly's horrified because she's a real person. in a real world and
Yeah.
wants a provider and doesn't want these risky things happening around her or for her kid or for the man she loves. So it's just interesting that Farseer, especially when it was written in the 90s, was not an overtly violent thing, right? Like it was definitely looking at the inspection, not just of the hero and heroic actions, but violence, even on a small scale when it seems like it's deserved.
Yeah, that's a good point.
There's a lot of
Yeah, it's really
horror
interesting.
about the war as well. And what always sticks in my mind is when he finds the Forged Ones fighting over the little girl. The sheer horror that small children are at risk in war for nothing. They're just going to die because these things are happening around them. And it doesn't shy away from that. And yet at the same time, it's important to the story because at that point we see how easily the berserker in Fitz is awoken, because he immediately just becomes enraged because there's this child that has been killed for nothing.
Yeah. And shouldn't we all react that way?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was, I mean, who could make that a beautiful thing?
I think it's interesting too that the scenes where it didn't feel like the Coterie. Am I saying that word right? Coterie. I don't know how to say that word
Coterie.
right.
Yep.
Thank you, Coterie. When he's interacting with those two, with Serene and Justin, and it's like he's seeing the results of the way that Galen approached teaching the skill, which is not the only way to teach the skill, but he sees the result of just the continuous abuse and what that does to them, how it completely dements their personalities. And it seems like Fitz just barely escaped that. Although, of course, not to say that there weren't any repercussions in Fitz, but it seemed like it could have gone a very different direction for him had he succeeded.
Yeah.
There's also the point that Fitz makes when he talks to Serene at one point, and he goes, you know that Verity's alive. You know that what you're doing is a lie. You are being a traitor, and you know it. And you can't do anything about it because it's been put into your brain, literally, by somebody else. And that's an aspect of the skill that is horrifying, that somebody can literally take away a fundamental part of who you are. And it's awful because it goes back that generation to chivalry taking that from Galen and going, no, you're not allowed to hate me, and forcing him to worship the ground he walked on. And for that to carry through to Galen punishing Fitz so horrendously, and then instilling that same rabid loyalty into the Coterie to the point where they can't not react. And it goes back to agency again. They don't have the agency to stand up to Regal and say, no, this is a lie. They've been forced into supporting this. And it's, for all that I really didn't like Justin and Serene and the rest of the Coterie, it makes them almost worthy of pity that they've had that taken away. So
I believe Fitz has had some of his memories taken away too. So I think that's something that we can relate back to Fitz, because I'm a big believer that when Fitz sees his mom in the market in book 1, and she's yelling for him, I believe the Shrewd had wiped those memories. But some people disagree with me. But that's my ongoing theory, and I think it's consistent.
It was Shrewd or himself, but
it's certainly possible, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely possible, and as consistent as you say.
That also aligns with aligns with Joanna, your theory about not trusting Verity, because it also brings up the question: is Verity just constantly skilling on Fitz to make him worship the ground that he's walking on and trust him with everything, that every thought that comes into his brain and every action? It's a really good point.
That's so interesting, because so that's kind of like a dark side of how someone loses agency with the skill. And on the other hand, in this world, the wit magic is seen as that way too. It's seen as like you have no agency. You're going to become this beast.
Yep.
So it's interesting, though, the way that that's looked down upon, whereas the skill obviously
Mm.
is more civilized.
And isn't it weird that the royalty has the skill and has control of the skill, and the wit is more for the common folk and the old blood, and it is demonized? Isn't that interesting?
Wolves have no kings.
Wolves have no kings. I'm gonna get it tattooed on my forehead. The dopest line of all time.
It's like the greatest ending line.
Oh, are you kidding me, dude? When
Oh my
Bjorch is
God.
holding Fitz and he says, "You're not dead, son."
That was the hardest hitting scene.
That broke my heart.
Yeah.
To me,
Which
probably the
buckets
most
at
emotional
because he
moment.
calls him son, and you know he means it.
Yep.
That you're my child. I raised you, and you can't be dead.
Yeah.
Yes, Scott. Derry is
It's-
Realm of the Elderlings expert.
Yay,
I've read
Scott.
these ones. I know these books.
I'm so happy to join all of the fun fans here. This is such a fun fandom to join. So I'm excited about it.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, I would definitely
and
agree.
there's just
Like,
so much
what
to
everyone's saying.
explore.
Yeah, there is. And I think like at different stages of your life, I feel like these books could mean different things. It's hard to imagine another series where you're through someone's life with them like this, and for it to be done so well. And the range of Rob and Hobb really gets explored in this book as well, because the combat is so well done. Not just in the raids or whatever, but more so at the end when Fitz lashes out. We're in this close quarter combat situation and he's acting like an animal. I mean, how well written is that?
Yeah.
So good.
Well, that's the other thing too, just kind of going back to agency and the skill and the wit, was just how much self-control he actually had at the end when Regal was trying to torture him to prove he had the wit.
Yeah. Did you all, when he's being tortured, Bjorch comes to see him and spits in his face, like, did it just absolutely rip your heart out? Because I thought something was happening, but I wasn't positive. And like, I was just like, this book, I had no reason to believe something good would ever come from this, because everything had been like just stomped out, and I'm thinking about Bjorch like killing Nosy, but didn't really kill Nosy. I'm like, is he good? Is he bad? I'm so confused. And I was just like a mess the last like 100 pages of this book.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. When that scene happened, I just like was going along with the ride at that point, and I was just that hit hard. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
See, for me, the hardest part in the dungeons was Patience visiting, because she knew it might be the last time she was going to see him, and the way that she and Lacey did it was almost comical as well. I mean, how do you bring humor to that situation? She managed to, because they dosed the guards and gave them the crap that gave them the runs. That's hilarious. That she's going to see this boy in the dungeon because the guards all have the runs. That's brilliant. And, but all she can do for him is give him an apple.
Yeah,
I know.
The tragedy of it is just,
And Lacey, that's the name of her.
Yeah.
That I love
Lacey. She's
her bodyguard.
Awesome.
But she's so innocuous. Who would think?
Yes.
We were supposed to get a Patience and Lacey novella at some point, but it's on hold from what I understand.
That would be interesting.
I would sell my soul for that.
Yep, same.
Because I love Patience so much.
Same. Simply arm of plenty of tissues. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's multiple scenes in this book, and I just remember like reading it and being like, "Wow, that was only." I think it's only what 550 pages, or is it longer? I can't remember.
Only.
Yeah, only. Well, compared to some of these other chapters.
The illustrated was like 680 or something.
I mean, it's a reasonably sized book, but a lot of stuff happens that just is so monumental, and I do believe like. So also, I'm just going to give you the heads up. The first 180 to 200 pages of Assassin's Quest are some of the best in the series, in my opinion.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, you're right. Absolutely.
Insane. Like, they're insanely good. You should start tonight.
Absolutely.
Oh,
absolutely.
I'm so excited too. Yeah. I don't know. For me, I think like one of the things, I mean, just I just keep going back to loyalty with this book too, especially because when I think of dogs and I think of wolves and this relationship, I think of loyalty and the we are pack thing. And but at the same time, it just feels like him trying to be loyal to Molly, trying to be loyal to Shrewd, trying to be loyal to Verity, trying to be loyal to Shade, and trying to do all these things and not do things that Shade doesn't know about, and trying to do what Burek wants him to do, and it just crushes him in the end. And then at the end, he just gets totally destroyed anyway. So,
and Nighteyes is constantly trying to get him to live in the moment, you know. And Fitz is always fighting that with duty and the future of the realm of, you know, of the crown and all these things. And that's another pull, right? And then Fitz starts to make decisions that only seem good in the now, that are not good in the long term.
no.
But also, like, what other choice was there at that point too? Like, Shrewd dying was so tragic, you know. And then for it to be blamed on him, I mean, it's tough.
Yeah, I wondered if maybe it was a little unwise for him to go after Justin and Serene.
Could you believe what you were reading? Like, I could not believe when he was doing it. I was like, wait, what? He's doing something?
Yeah. Another scene that totally broke me, by the way, was the scene where the Fool points out to Fitz that it wasn't that giving her hope that Verity is still alive might actually cause her more grief or more suffering than if she were to just grieve his death. Just to have that lingering hope was actually more torture for her.
Yeah, and I think, and Shade sort of says, you made a mistake because Regal thought he had her beaten. But now she's carrying herself in a way that tells Regal, no, you haven't crushed her. She needs more. We need to do more to break her back down again, rather than just allowing her to follow in that grief. But when you were saying earlier, Jimmy, about the Queen of Perspective, you see it within other characters as well. And that's a perfect point. In showing Kettricken that Verity was still alive, her point of view, her perspective on her behavior changes because she has different information. So she behaves differently. And you see that in greater or lesser forms all the way through the book, that what people believe to be true affects the way they act. And so controlling that truth, manipulating that truth is a power in itself. And Shade is a bit of a master at it. So,
yes, information is the third piece of magic in this series. Yeah, I think I said that in one of my reviews. I said information is at an all-time premium at Buck.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, and you said it earlier, Joanna, with the Dukes not seeing Regal for what he is, because they never had the full story. Their perspective on Regal showed them a spoiled boy. Fitz's perspective on Regal is this guy will kill people who are in his way. So not sharing the same knowledge, it weakens the Dukes. It puts them in a position where they don't have all of the information that they need to make decisions, and so make the wrong one. And Hobb is a genius because it all is perfectly logical that they don't have that information. It's perfectly logical that the Dukes will react this way without that information. So it works. It makes sense. You know, you're never thinking, oh no, the Dukes are idiots, because they're not. They just don't ever see anything to make them.
It is truly brilliant the way that Fitz's whole life so far, throughout the beginning of Assassin's Apprentice up until now, has been wrapped up in Buckkeep, whether it's in the stables or in his chamber, which is a whole other thing, or with Molly there, or with Patience, or up in the garden, the Queen's Garden, all these different places around the palace. And you see how it all unravels at the end. You see the horses being taken away.
Yeah.
You see the food being taken away. You see all of the furniture being swept out of the palace. You see how Regal is just taking everything away from Buckkeep. and at the same time, everything is falling apart in Fitz's life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think that's why I liked.
that anchor piece of his life. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's why I like the Fool so much in this book, because I thought he added a new perspective to Fitz's interactions with the character and just like analysis of everything that was going on that you hadn't heard before. And I actually read something that was interesting. I don't know how true it is, but they were saying like Hobb basically has the Fool, at least in Farseer, as really focused on the past, and Fitz is focused on the future, and then Nighteyes is focused on the present. And it's just like this constant perspective from where they're coming from, what they value in terms of how they analyze their every situation, and like who they are loyal to and who they are, what they want out of what they want for Buckkeep based on their past or what their goals are. Like for Fitz, he's looking forward, and the Fool's really loyal to Shrewd because of things in the past. So I don't know. I really enjoyed the Fool. He
That's
added
an interesting
some
way of
really,
looking at it, actually.
That is a brilliant
Although I
way
would
of
put
looking
it
at
the other way around. I would put it the other way around. The Fool, by his nature of prophecy and foresight, is looking to the future, and Fitz wanting comfort and stability, looking to the past. He's not keen on the unknown. But the concept, I like that. I do like that.
Yeah, and also the Fool serves as a hint that there's more.
yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like he's a dash of fantasy in this, just being a jester. You know, he's almost like a dash of like, hey guys, remember this is fantasy. There might be more to come. There might be bigger things at play here, and he's like a constant reminder. He's breadcrumbs to lead you on the way, and Fitz.
That is so interesting, because I know that there was a part when he's talking about his story where he says something along the lines of the past being the future. Something along those lines, something that was kind of enigmatic, that kind of confused Fitz.
Oh my God. I just need you guys to read every book.
I can't wait to see where this prophecy goes.
Like
We need you to have more context so we can keep talking.
Like I'm literally just sitting here and I'm just like, wow.
Can't
There
say
is
that, can't say that.
so many things that we're talking. Well, no, it's even just there's so many things that we're talking about. Like, oh man, wow, she did a lot of good work in this first trilogy.
Oh wow,
She really did. And that that's why you do have to read Farseer. It bothers me when people say, no, you can start at live ships. No, you can't. You need to read Farseer.
Publication order always.
Yeah,
always.
Yeah, it's tricky because, like we said,
really important.
Fitz does make a lot of dumb, foolish decisions, but at the same time, I feel like they're so unbelievable. They're so understandable. Which, by the way, one of my favorite scenes was when they were like toasting to being fools. I think it was like Burek and Fitz.
Oh yes,
yeah, the boys moment there.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah,
that was
great. Lacey comes in with the chicken, and she's like, "Guys, come on,
yeah,
that's on the line here, and you're getting drunk. Come on."
I love.
Oh
that
man.
scene.
Oh man.
That's yes.
Joanna, do you remember in the airport when we were flying back from ICFA? I said the series that I was most excited for you to read was Realm of the Elderlings.
Yeah, I do remember.
I said the discussions. I said I just knew. I was like, this is your series.
Oh,
like, I knew it.
Yeah, I'll never forget that conversation, and I remember that because that was the reason I knew it was time to pick up this series, as I said in my review, because at that moment in my reading journey, I just felt it. Because I was going to start this series at the beginning of the year when a lot of friends here in the chat already started, and it just wasn't the right time because I had just finished Malazan Book of the Fallen, and I felt like it just wasn't the right time. Like I just needed some space to process, I think, that 10-book series. And then when I did pick up I'm sorry?
I'm really glad you did wait until you felt like, nope, now's the time.
Yeah, it was weird because
I don't think this is a book you just read from your TBR. I think you have to want to have an emotive story and go into it ready for that instead of going, okay, this is just the next book on the list that I should read. I think that waiting as you did to feel like, yep, now's the time, was perfect. That's the perfect time to start.
It
That's
must be
exactly
Farseer
it.
season because my wife just read it. She read the Farseer Trilogy. She has finished it. And then my best friend is finishing Assassin's Quest this month. So
Ah,
it's something in the air. I don't know what it is, but here we
yeah,
are.
it
Yeah,
must
I
be.
totally picked it up based off just like a feeling for that type of story, even though I didn't know what the story was about at all. But I like finished. I think it was Grace of Kings. It was right before Grace of Kings, but I finished a book, and then I was like really in the mood for just a traditional fantasy, even though that's not. I don't know. I was in for that type of setting, and so I was like, okay, I'll finally pick up Farseer, and then I picked it up, and I was just like, this is so good.
I know.
It's like,
Yeah, same here. I didn't even tell anybody I was going to pick it up when I picked it up.
Yep.
I told
Way to go.
Derry. I told because she had just put out your Realm of the Elderlings video that I was so inspired
Yeah.
by, and I told Ben because we were going to Betty read Red Country, and I decided to put that off to read this instead. And that was pretty much it. I think Ola too. I think there was like 3 people, and that's it. I didn't tell anybody else. And the reason why I just I don't know why. I just didn't really want to broadcast it until I read the first book.
Yeah.
But
But
it
it's a very private sort of read.
but it was also really special. And I almost reached out to you, Jimmy, and I almost told you. And I thought I would surprise you more with a review and shouting out your video.
Yes,
But,
I enjoyed it. I did the same thing with Name of the Wind. I didn't really tell anybody that I was reading it. I was like, I'm just going to read it and see what happens.
yeah. But that conversation that we had in the airport and you talking about how much it pulled on your heartstrings, that was kind of what came up for me. I'm like, yeah, it's time. I need to pick this up.
I need to be crushed.
Yeah, I need to be crushed. Exactly. And
yeah.
Oh, we do have to get Steve to read it, Brandy. We do.
yeah.
He would love it.
Oh, do you think I
bit
wonder
long
if he
for Steve.
would? Yeah.
You're a
I
bit long,
hope so.
Steve. He tends to read the shorter horror.
I know he doesn't
novels.
like the chosen one trope. Would you all say this is a chosen one kind of trope?
I wouldn't, because
There's nothing exceptional about this.
Yeah. I was expecting that.
He's not the brightest bulb in the box.
There is an
I say
inspection
a
of
lot.
being
Nighteyes
a
is the
hero.
brains.
Yeah, and the term hero is used very loosely. In fact, I would say that the word hero and doing the right thing is actually weaponized against Fitz to get him to be manipulated by the crown. So if you're going to say anything about a chosen one, it would be the inspection of the cost of that. But no, he's not the chosen one.
Okay, yeah. He's a catalyst. We could say that much.
Yes.
That's what the book calls him.
I mean, there are times where he doesn't feel like the main character in his own story.
That's true.
That's right.
And it's like, it's kind of the coming of age of realizing, oh, I'm not the only person who the world doesn't revolve around me, right? But I love what you said, Alex, about it is a traditional fantasy setting, but at the same time, we don't really have a traditional fantasy story.
Yeah, I went in expecting more of a traditional fantasy story, and I was like pleasantly surprised, which I was wanting. I like wanted to be surprised about it, but
yeah, I'd always heard it was like a Song of Ice and Fire, and that's why it's actually I think it's the first books I picked up after I finished the Song of Ice and Fire. I picked up Will Time and the Farseer Trilogy, and
very different.
I put it off because I actually watched Alex Nevaez's review.
Similarities.
Yeah, Alex Nevaez reviewed it. He didn't like it. He's like, "Oh, it's first person. I thought it was supposed to be," and I said, "Oh, this is right when he first got on BookTube." He ended up reading it like 2 years later and then gave it 5 stars. And was like, "What was I thinking? I didn't know any better." Blah 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 blah. Right? But I remember watching his review and being like, "Oh, it's first person. I don't like first person." And what I really should have said was I hadn't read a lot of first person. Is what I should have said. Which isn't it weird? Like when you read, like you find that you have biases that aren't real.
They're never real.
Yep.
I've been saying that I hate flashbacks for like, I don't know, 3 years. And someone was like, Jimmy, every time you mention that you hate flashbacks, you're talking about an exception of not hating this flashback.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, you know what? You're right.
I feel the same way. I mean, I'm always saying I don't like this and I don't like that, but then I'm always proven wrong. So what does that mean?
Yep.
So I think it means we just have like, these blinders on, my this is random. I'm sorry. The reason why I don't like flashbacks is I hate on penultimate episodes in TV shows where they do an entire flashback and left you on a cliffhanger. Like if it's eight episodes, they have a huge cliffhanger in 6, and then 7 they do a whole flashback. It's like, piss off. I
So
hate
really, you hate filler.
it's not even filler because it always ends up being okay, but it just breaks the momentum. Like I feel like you're playing with me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Put it in the beginning.
Sorry, I should. It has nothing to do with
A
Hobb
pacing
doesn't fly.
issue almost.
It does. It does. It kills momentum for me personally. And that's why I've been saying for years that I hate flashbacks. When in reality, I like plenty of books that have flashbacks. Sorry, Joanna.
That's okay. That's so funny that you're recommending Sarah J. Maas. I do have a kind of bias against Sarah J. Maas.
Do you?
I've only read 2 books and I just wasn't.
My
super-
wife's on the second one right now. She just finished Farseer to read that, so we'll see what she thinks. It was funny though. She was reading Robin Hobb. She was reading Farseer. She goes, "Oh, this writing is quite better, isn't it?" So yeah, just a bit.
Yeah, quite better. Yeah.
Yeah, quite better.
But having said that, I mean, I'm a fan of brain fluff, so it's literally what are you in the mood for at the moment?
That's
Yeah.
true. Yeah, absolutely.
exactly.
Absolutely. 100%.
But,
And
Hobb
so
speaks to my heart a lot.
yeah. So I got a lot of
Even
interesting
now on my
messages.
reread.
I got a lot of interesting
Sorry, go on.
messages earlier about how about my Verity conspiracy theory, and then there were some Kettricken. If I can't say her name right, Kettricken.
Yeah.
I'm
Say
sorry.
however you want.
I'm the worst at pronouncing words. Yeah, so Kettricken conspiracy theories were coming up as well. Obviously, I don't know what's going to happen, but Alex, what about you? What do you think about Kettricken or Verity or what's to come? Do you have any sort of theories or ideas for moving forward to the third
Hopes.
book?
I'm worried for Kettricken. I don't know. I feel like based on what Hobb's done so far, and just what everyone says about Hobb and like how she, as soon as you feel like it can't get worse, it gets worse. I'm just like looking at the situation and I'm like, well, I mean, I don't know. I'm worried for Kettricken and like her safety in either Farseer or in the future. And then Verity, I don't know, because I don't know if Farseer is going to answer a lot of the questions that's been presented in Royal Assassin. Whether like, I would hope that we get to see more about Verity's quest and what's going on there. And I would also love to see more about like the red ships and the white ship, as you were saying earlier. Like that was fascinating to me. But I don't know if how many questions are actually going to be answered, because it is the ending of a trilogy, but it's a 16-book series. So, I mean, there's a lot of background to come, but I don't know. I have no idea, because a lot of my predictions for Royal Assassin were wrong, and Fitz ended up in a way worse spot than I expected it was going to end up in. So yeah. I don't know. I'm really interested to see the rebound of Nighteyes and Fitz after the ending of Royal Assassin, though, because after the ending of Royal Assassin, I was like, I mean, how is that relationship going to be affected by that whole sequence of events? Because it was just heavy.
Yeah. Well, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. I am the worst, honestly, Derry, when it comes to predicting endings or predicting anything. Like I said, the only thing that I have a hunch on right now is I don't trust Verity, but it seems like that's not confirmed by anybody one way or the other. So
anything you sort of are hoping to learn, or, you know, what am I trying to ask? What are you yearning for to close off the trilogy?
Geez, that's a good question. I have no idea. That's terrible, huh?
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I just go into
because it means that whatever happens is going to be whatever happens.
I'm just looking forward to whatever happens. I know that there are some mixed feelings about the third book, and I don't know why that would be the case. But it seemed like here in the chat, a lot of people were really, really fond of that third book. So we'll see.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of mixed feelings, but I'm going in pretty hopeful.
There's a lot of great stuff. I think even people who dislike the book or rank it low, there's still some really good stuff, and it's very important. Like it's very important. It's probably the book that increases the most in for me in hindsight. Probably the book that I would rank higher now that I've finished the series.
Is there any way to
Jake
give away
just
in a
reread
non? Is there any way to give away in a non-spoiler way why there might be some mixed feelings about that third book?
It's longer.
It is a lot
Yeah, that's what
longer,
I've heard.
and there is, and if you're not particularly connected to Fitz, it can drag. But I know that you have a heart connection to Fitz. That's not going to be an issue for you. And I know you, Alex, have really, really enjoyed the first two. I don't see you having an issue with Assassin's Quest at all.
Cool.
And it's just really long, and you
and
you
it
need
is
to with Fitz.
Yeah, and it's definitely like kind of a shock, right? Because like Assassin's Apprentice, you can read in like an afternoon. Royal Assassin, still kind of big, like I said, but it's not like the biggest book you've ever seen. And then like Assassin's Quest, like a full, Stormlight Archive book. I mean, it's massive.
Yeah, it's big.
And it's Robin Hobb doing Robin Hobb things. So you're going to be in the monotony of the everyday life and all kinds of stuff. I also think that the book gets a lot of flack for going on because of the first 180 to 200 pages being phenomenal. Like, it's so good, but you can't do that the whole way. Like you have to slow it down a little bit. And I think that, in a lot of relatively lulls, yeah. But it's very methodical. I like it personally. The things that when I reviewed it, I talked about are actually not what other people talk about. So it's interesting. Like the things that I found to make me go, I didn't like that so much. Totally different than what maybe the popular opinion. Who knows what the popular opinion is? But my wife really enjoyed it. My best friend is struggling a little bit with it. He still likes it, but he's like, like the other one more. So totally subjective. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, I've decided I am probably the most unreliable person when it comes to pacing, because sometimes I'll say, oh, I thought it was really fast paced, and other people will say, oh, that was really slow.
I just had that conversation today about Memories of Ice with someone. Memories of Ice are like, this book is dragging, and I'm like, I remember like my eyebrows being peeled off the back of my skull. Like, are we reading the same book? But it just hits people different.
Yeah. I'm that way. If people tend to think it's slow, I usually think it's fast. And Evie's right. Evie and I tend to have a very similar taste in books, so her liking it is very promising for me too. I am very attached to Fitz as well. So we'll see how it goes.
I genuinely don't see you having a problem with it at all. You're going to think, why don't people like this?
Okay, Quest could be a reason though, because I know some people are not. Some people aren't as crazy about quests, which is kind of crazy to me. It's like fantasies.
It's like classic fantasy.
Yeah, I don't know, and I love classic fantasy. So
I'm gonna make a prediction. I think Joanna, whenever you read Live Ships, I think that you're going to love Live Ships. I think it'll be your favorite trilogy of all time.
I can't wait to read it now.
I don't. It's going to be Tawny Man.
Well, yeah, then Tawny Man will surpass it. But at the time that she completed Ship of Destiny, I think it could end up being your favorite thing you've ever read.
Wow.
Could be.
I really do.
Yeah.
I really do. Like when I think about, like when I was talking to you about Hobb, I was thinking Live Ship because it's so complex. It's very good.
Well, it's different as well. I mean,
yes.
when you read Farseer, it's very intimate. It's one person. It's one journey. It has a very different feel to Live Ships, even though they're undisputably written by the same person. Yeah. Because Live Ships is so much broader in scope and so many more threads, and there's just more of so many things. So it's so very different, and yet so very the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for my money, the final trilogy is the best, which you couldn't ask for. I mean, that's what you hope for, right? Like you hope the last thing is the best. And in my opinion, Assassin's Fate is still probably, I think it's the second best book I've ever read for me. Yeah. So.
That just blows my mind. That blows my mind if she could do that. That she could write like this a series of this scope and bring it home like that, the way that you two describe it, the way you and Derry describe it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's one thing.
Not very many.
Yeah, I mean, because I think it's one thing to have like a brilliant idea for a fantasy series, and it's a whole other thing to be able to bring it to fruition. but also to bring it to fruition in such a satisfying way
Oh yeah.
that ties everything together. That's
Yeah, I might be in the minority here, but a lot of people say that they hope that she continues because she's like kicked it around, and I hope she doesn't. I'm okay with novellas and stuff. I hope she never writes another main entry. Because like that last trilogy, I mean, I would read the shit out of it, but like, I want it, but at the same time, it's like, it's so perfect. But people said that about Fool's Fate too.
This will be what. That's right. When Tawny Man finished, that was anybody could stop there and feel completely satisfied that they've read a beautiful, complete story.
That's right.
And then you get the next arc, and it comes all the way to Assassin's Fate. Yeah. But I'm rereading the final trilogy at the moment, and I'm finding so many things. I'm like, there's a lot here that could move forward. There's a lot here, and now I'm getting really kind of, please, please, one more trilogy would be amazing. Because it's there that the tapestry that she's woven, it doesn't have defined edges. There's enough threads that could go in a lot of directions, and to have had an amazing end, then another amazing end just lets me think, well, who's to say there couldn't be another amazing end?
Yeah, if there's anyone that can do it, it's her. And I guess what me and Derry are trying to say to you both is that like it just keeps getting better. Like it's insane.
I believe it.
It really is.
It's awesome.
It's honestly hard. It's hard to really put into words. And some people don't feel that way. You know, some people go through live ships and they go, I didn't like live ships, and that's totally fine. But like if you click with it, man, you're in for a treat. You're in for a treat.
Yeah. Well, her writing style for me, and I know it's going to be different because there are multiple POVs and more approach to expansive world building from what I understand. And it seems like, I could already see kind of hints of maybe live ship stuff kind of being hinted at in this book. I wonder. But in any case, I think like her writing style for me feels so cozy. Like it feels like
it is.
A warm blanket next to the fire with maybe just a little bit of a bitter alcohol or something, because there's still that reality punch that you get. But yeah, I agree.
It's like a really rich hot chocolate with a sprinkling of coffee on the top. It's all of the things you want, and it's comforting, and it's full-bodied, and it's got just enough magic to it. And the style is accessible. Like you don't have to feel like you need an English degree to read it and follow it and get the themes and understand what's happening. And yet it moves swiftly enough that if prose isn't what attracts you to a book, there's enough character, there's enough not a lot, but what action is there is great. So it doesn't sort of drag you through really flowery writing, but it's also not four-word sentences of really simplistic. It's the Goldilocks zone of writing. It's just right. And
I think her and Abercrombie, I always said her and Abercrombie have a lot in common. Like they're two totally different writers, and you can tell them apart, but they know how to say a sentence in the perfect way to relay the intent or the message behind it in their way. And Hobb isn't overly wordy. Neither is Abercrombie. They know when to be very sharp and cut off a sentence and stuff. There's a lot of similarities between those two.
That's cool. And just to answer your question, Connor, I have not read the Soldier Sun trilogy. I've never heard of it.
I have. I read it quite a long time ago, though, and I didn't think very highly of it. In hindsight, I'm going to reread because I blamed it for not being a Realm of the Elderlings book, I think. So I am going to reread it, and I'm going to reread it and try and read it as a separate thing that's not what I wanted it to be, and let it be what it is and see how I feel, because I'm pretty sure I'll feel differently about it with that different mindset. So because she does write.
It's all part of our reading journeys, right? Is learning to be open to the stories that are different, that are not all the same, different writing styles, different approaches to fantasy. It's part of that journey.
Noelle also said it's so hard to think anything can top Farseer. And I actually rank Farseer like near the bottom, which is crazy.
Wow.
That's what I've heard. A lot of people say that.
Almost everybody ranks it second to last
Yeah.
over Rain Wilds. That's pretty universal among everyone who's read the whole thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what you've got to look forward to. That this is pretty much the weakest entry. Yeah.
Well, that was wonderful. Any final thoughts to close off the Royal Assassin? Of
Please
course.
bring me back.
Yes, you all, of course, more than welcome. We're going to do this again. I know Alex and I already talked about definitely getting together again for the third book.
Awesome.
So
that'll be really interesting.
very excited for that. And I think
Awesome.
we're both going to be reading it this next month, right?
Yeah. Yep. I'm going to try to read it like middle of June, I think is when I'm going to aim to read it, but I can't wait.
Yeah, same here.
Royal Assassin was so good.
Yeah. I'm very excited for it.
I mean, it is. It's brilliant.
Wonderful.
I'm excited.
I'm also excited to see
Assassin's Creed.
I'm also excited to see where the whole arc of the trilogy as a whole ends and how that would set up for like something. I guess the next one would be Tawny Man in terms of Fitz's story. Just see how it sets up anything for that and what's not answered and what's answered. And I don't know. That'll be really interesting to see.
It's just crazy. I mean, I know we're not at an end point with Fitz's journey, but just seeing where this book ends up with
It's like, where do you go from here?
Well, exactly.
Guy.
He literally dies. He leaves his body and he has like an NDE at the end.
Best resurrection of all time.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. For all that people hate, the resurrection trope, I have never read it any better than what you get at the beginning of Assassin's Creed.
That is so
really good.
true.
Never.
Yeah, I think it was so well done, and for me, because of the way it's done, and he comes back, he clearly seems pretty well. Okay, I shouldn't say anymore because I did read the very first couple of pages of Assassin's Quest, so I won't say anything about that. Just the first couple of pages, like that's it, like just the italicized parts.
Just a sample. That's all.
But yeah, I'm really, I just think the way it's going for Fitz, I'm like, this isn't quite a chosen one. I mean, we already kind of confirmed that he's not really a chosen one in that sense. And it's not like an anti-hero necessarily. It's like, it's something totally
It's a story about a boy.
Yeah.
A boy and his wolf.
And his wolf.
Yeah.
Because we all love Nighteyes.
Oh, Nighteyes is wonderful.
I was waiting for him to show up, and when he finally showed up in this book, it was awesome. Because I've heard like fans who have read the series that just love Nighteyes, and then up until Assassin's Apprentice, you didn't see him. At least I don't think he did. So when he showed up in this book and they confirmed that his name was Nighteyes, I was like, yes, I'm so excited.
Oh.
Yeah, that's probably the one spoiler, I think, for anyone attempting to read Hobb, as everybody knows Nighteyes exists.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of people that wait for Nighteyes to arrive.
Yeah.
And he doesn't disappoint when he does arrive because he's perfect.
Yeah.
So, me too now.
We will see if Verity comes and saves the day in book 3. And then I can see what I think then. But sorry, Noelle. We'll see what I think. I don't know. Ready to see where it goes. So I guess that just about does it for, I think, did we get our thoughts out on Royal Assassin?
I think so.
Anybody else wanted to say or mention?
I feel it was
some
good therapy.
All right. Well, I want to thank
trauma.
I want to thank Jerry and Jimmy and Alex for joining me tonight on a Friday night to talk about this book, because it's been so wonderful to talk about it and share thoughts.
Definitely.
And thank everyone in the chat for joining us. Thank you all so, so much.
Absolutely.
I love hearing your thoughts as well. And I hope you all join us again when we do this again for Assassin's Quest. So
Definitely.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, have a good night, everybody. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
See you guys.
Like and subscribe.